Colour and tone are key ingredients when it comes to giving an image its mood, meaning and visual punch. Colour has the power to stir emotions, lead the viewer's eye around the frame and add depth or atmosphere. Tone, meaning how light or dark different parts of the image are, helps set the mood, draw attention to important areas and keep things visually interesting. Getting to grips with how colour and tone work together is a big part of what helps photographers tell their story and connect with the viewer. More often than not, at the time of capture, you will know how the edit is going to proceed. But sometimes this isn't always the case. Thanks for tuning back into the channel. In this week's video, we are going to look at an edit, and it's an image in particular that I couldn't decide what I wanted to do with it, whether I wanted to keep it in colour or whether I wanted to keep it in black and white. So you're going to see my process of editing, my indecision, and also the final image, which at the end I change again. Now I'm sure this is something that we all do, but I thought I would record the process for you, so hopefully you can relate to it. The edit on screen just now is one of those times, again, when you take the image, you know exactly how the edit is going to evolve to achieve the mood and feel of the image that you have just taken. Now, this one was straightforward for me, and I just wanted to emphasise certain areas, create light and create depth within the image using what was already there. Because the image is unbalanced, I'm going to remove the rocks on the right hand side, and to do this I'm simply going to use the cone stamp tool and remembering to adjust my selection point to avoid any repetition whatsoever. When I want the horizon line just to be right, I'll use the marquee tool and just cordon off a section using that tool and then copy back in. To finalise, I use the blur tool along the horizon line. So let's go with that, and we will now go into camera raw filter. So if you're doing this in Lightroom, it's exactly the same process. So what we're going to do is we're going to edit this, and then we are going to begin to tonalise it and get the mood and feel that I want from this. So the first thing we're going to do is add a tiny bit of contrast into this. I'll lift the highlights slightly, lift the shadows slightly. Whites, I'm going to be playing around with the sky, so I'm going to leave the whites roughly about there. Blacks, I'm going to lift slightly. Exposure, yeah, that works for that. It's opening up some of the sky for me, some of the blues in the sky. So the next thing from here is I'm going to get in and edit the image, and then I'm going to work and get it to the mood and feel that I want. So I'm going to get into masks straight away, into the landscape. So you can see we've got the sky, mountains, and the water. So let's just take all three of these at the moment and click create. So with the sky, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the exposure of it slightly, and then I'm going to add some contrast. From here, I'm going to lift the highlights slightly. Shadows, I may take down because it's going to emphasize what I'm going to do later. I am definitely adding texture and clarity to this. There's lovely clouds there. I need them just to pop out, and I'm adding quite a bit of texture to that. Let's see once we boost the clarity in. You'll notice now we are getting some magenta up here as well. We may play with that. Okay, for now, let's go into the water. Again, I'm going to lift the exposure slightly. Not too much, because we will then have a highlight along the horizon. The contrast, let's add some of that back in. If we go too much, too little, it just depends on how much you want to push. Highlights, we're going to lift. I'm aware of what's going on up here in my histogram. Whites, we may lift them slightly, and the blacks we won't touch. And again, I want texture in this. Although it was a long exposure, I still want some texture in it. So I'm going to add some texture and add some clarity. And then I'm going to lift the exposure again, just to about there. Quite happy with that. Now the sky, as you'll notice, is bleeding on here and creating a slight line in here. So what we're going to do with that is we are going to erase some of that and we are going to subtract. So if I go in here and I subtract using a linear gradient, I'm going to do that. Just a small one, and that should take care of any lines along the horizon. Yep, it looks okay at that. Let's bring it back slightly, just to about there. So now I can go back in and edit the sky further. So for this, I'm going to create a new mask, linear gradient this time. Bring it down to around about there. I'm then going to bring the exposure down, which should help give some volume to those clouds. I'm going to add a bit of contrast, which will then work in here as well. So we add some contrast and you can see what's happening now as soon as we do that. So we're getting some nice separation up here in the clouds. Highlights, I think just about there. I always take things to more than I want just to see how it's going to look. So like shadows I could take right down to there or push them right up to there. It's entirely up to you how you do this. The whites, blacks, I could take it to there or there. But you'll notice I'm gaining more detail in the clouds and slightly more volume. Temperature wise, I may bring that down slightly and add some more magenta tint to it. Not too much. But you can see how that's changed the image already. Again, we keep adding clarity and texture, and let's see how much we are going to add to this. And it'll be interesting to see from the before and after just how much has been pulled from the clouds. I'm unsure about this area here, so I'm going to go and edit the rest of the image and then look at it as an overall. So the next thing I'm going to do is go into the water. And we have edited the water slightly. I may add a slight magenta tint to it as well, just to about there. So from here, I'm going to go back into the mountains, as it calls it. So I'm going to add a tiny bit of contrast in here. And I am going to lift the highlights slightly, shadows ever so slightly. You'll notice that the colour is beginning to change in here. So let's change the temperature just a tiny bit. So if I go too far, and now let's go into point colour. Let's take that there, which is that one. Let's increase that slightly. So you'll see how much control we have now just with point colour. And I can always adjust this as well. So I've got the variance in here as well. So I can let some of that green come back through for that. Let's just take it up again, more luminance. Again, I am okay with that. I actually think I'm quite happy. I think I'm going to go back and add some more contrast to that, which will help punch this even further. Although this is a long exposure, I also want to create more texture in here. So we're going to add another mask, yet another linear gradient. So we're just building this image up as we go, knowing the final outcome that we have. But for this video, I've got two purposes here. So I'll show you this edit first, then I'll quickly show you the second one. So I'm going to take the exposure back slightly, not too much, 0.5. And then I am going to add some clarity in here. And we're gaining a tiny bit. Too much texture, we're gaining a tiny bit for this image, and that is exactly what I'm after with this. Let's add some contrast in here, which will punch the whites slightly. Yep. So far, I am very happy with this. I like what's happening with the entire edit for the colour version. So I'm going to add another mask now. And this time I'm going to look at the colour range. And I'm going to go in there. And you'll see that the colour range there is a sampled colour, and it's that. So we're going to adjust that. See, if I do that, we get a nice purple sky into the magenta tint. So we've changed the aspect of the visuals here, and that's just too much. So let's drop back to about there. Again, still too much for this. I quite like the hints in here. Happy with that. I'll add another colour range layer. And this time we are going to go in here, which is that colour there. And we are going to add some more blue in there. And it is very slight. Another layer, another colour range. And let's go in there. And this time we've got that. And this is just to save us. If I do that, you'll notice how much that changes the actual image itself, where the light, and the light was over there, but it just shows you how much it's emphasising it. Final one for this edit, because I'm quite happy where it's went. It's just a quite simple edit, but it just lets you see what's going on with this, or in this case, what I'm trying to achieve with this. Right, so my first thing here is I'm going to lift the exposure, and that looks okay. Then I'm going to subtract both the rock and the sea. So the first subtraction is an object, and it's that rock. And there you go, the rock's subtracted from it. And it makes a massive difference. The second subtraction is going to be using a brush, and I am going to take the flow to 100 and the density to 100. And let's actually visualize the mask. So the mask is there. So if I paint out here, you'll see everything that's going on there. So if I click once there, now below the horizon, and roughly there, let's turn it off. So we now have this. So I'm going to turn this layer on and off just to show you the difference that that makes. And that is quite a big difference for this image. I am still unsure about the magenta up here. So let's just go back into the basic edit. Let's get into light, colour. Let's pull the tint back slightly. So let's take it back just a couple. -2, because I still have the colour in there and I've still got that there. Well, first of all, I'm going to click OK. So we started with this image, and you can see how much I've managed to pull out of the sky without, I don't think, going too overboard. It may be still a bit too dominating this. I'll see once everything's done. So we've now changed the kind of look and the mood of this image. Let's go for a further edit. So I'm going to copy this up, Control and J, or Command and J. I'm going to turn that colour one off. Again, I'm going to get into my black and white, and that is here, which is the Muse Pro. For me, Clean Portrait seems to be my go-to. I can go to any one of these at all. We could get into the classic black and white. I'm just going to step each one back. The crisp edit, which is actually quite nice in this instance. High key look, lab black and white, which is that. Again, quite nice, but for me, too domineering with the blacks in here. So it is always down to your personal taste. I tend to find the way I edit, the Clean Portrait kind of matches the final look that I am after with this. So a couple of things I'm going to do is I'm going to get into, and the first one is I'm going to get into the details. And I'm going to go for a simple dodge and burn. And here, and I'm using the mouse for this. So I'm going to go in, brush is already at white. Let's drop the opacity down roughly about 10, that's 5. 11 will do fine. 36. And now let's see where we are. So remember, if you're doing this at all, keep zooming back in and out of your image to make sure, and I'll do this quite quickly just for this video, just to make sure that you've not focused too much in the one area, forgetting about the rest in terms of your edit now becomes unrecognisable from the original image. So I've zoomed back out, so let's turn that on and off. Just slight. I can actually work this here now, just put that in there. And you'll notice I've just left the brush at normal. I could change the brush to screen. So with this, Shift, Control, Alt and E to create one layer in its own. For me, I'm going to go back into my Pro panel, which I use all the time. I'm going to get into the Orton effect, click OK, click OK. I'm not adjusting this one again. You'll see I'm just using the Orton effect as it's set. Go back into Tools. 2 is roughly about right for this. Looks okay here, and that's just working with the lights too. Then I'm going to apply the mask. So if I turn this layer on and off, you'll see that there is a slight difference, but not too much for this. So what I'm going to do is press F in my keyboard twice. So we have that image here. This is the black and white edit of this. And we also have the colour edit. Too much magenta now in the colour edit, as you'll notice. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy up a layer, J. And this is our original here. I'll mark that in red. I'm going to take this one back into Camera Raw filter. Simply go in to the masks, choose a linear gradient, take the linear gradient up. Now, I'm not going to desaturate this because if I desaturate it, that happens. What I'm going to do is I'm going to balance out the tint by taking it over towards the green. And that actually looks okay. So we went from that there, and hopefully you can see the magenta in there, to there with no magenta. Hopefully you get something from that, and hopefully it just lets you see two different ways of editing. Now, what I would like to say is if I decide an image is black and white at the point of shooting, I'll start the edit in black and white. I won't colour edit it first and then go into black and white because the tones in the image will change slightly. So for this one, as you can tell, I couldn't decide, and I still can't decide which one I prefer. I edited it in colour thinking that's what I wanted, and then decided let's jump over to black and white and see what it's like in black and white. So as I say, hopefully you get something from it from both edits. So that's it for this video. Thanks again for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.